And when he wasn't thrusting himself in my mouth, he was pulling my hair really hard. And with his other hand, he would just hit me and hit me and hit me. And I was like, it's hurting. And he was like, you better not bite me. You better not bite me. I hate what happened. I'm so very sorry. I never wanted to hurt anybody.
A pastor is dead, shot multiple times in his own apartment parking lot, while his wife screamed for help just a few feet away. And the woman who pulled the trigger was not a stranger. She was someone he had been secretly sleeping with. For nearly 2 years, a woman he had met inside a church counseling room. Let that sink in for a second.
Begin this Friday night with breaking news, and yes, word in, a verdict has been reached in Tennessee in the case of the pastor who was shot and killed by his girlfriend, Latoshia Daniels.
Now, let me paint you the full picture. It is Sunday morning, the choir is singing, the congregation is on their feet, and up at the front, dressed sharp and speaking with fire, stands a man the whole church trusts. He prays for broken marriages. He counsels hurting women. He talks about faithfulness and integrity like they are the very air he breathes. And behind closed doors, he is running a secret that would make your jaw hit the floor. This is not a movie. This is not something a writer made up. This happened in a real church, in a real apartment parking lot, and it ended with real gunshots and a real body on the ground, a respected pastor dead, his wife wounded, and a licensed social worker who spent her entire career helping people heal, standing there in handcuffs. Stay with me, because by the time we get to the end of this story, you are going to question everything you think you know about trust, faith, and what heartbreak can push a person to do. Before we talk about the shooting, we need to understand the woman at the center of all of this, because Latoshia Daniels is not a villain in a movie. She is a real human being, complicated and layered, and her story starts long before that parking lot. Latoshia grew up in Little Rock, Arkansas. By the time she was 17 years old, she was already pregnant and pushed into a marriage that was never going to last. Her husband cheated on her, she caught him, and the pain hit her so hard that she tried to end her own life. She was barely a teenager carrying the weight of the world. But she survived, and she did not just survive, she rebuilt. She went back to school, she earned her master's degree. She became a licensed clinical social worker, specializing in anger management and trauma recovery. And she even started her own nonprofit to help other people heal from the very kind of pain she had lived through herself. Think about that for a second. This woman turned her darkest moment into a career of helping people. She spent her days in offices and community centers, talking people off ledges, giving them tools to cope, reminding them they were worth something. She was the strong one, the one everyone leaned on. And behind all of that, her own life was quietly falling apart. Her second marriage had grown cold, distant. There was no warmth, no connection, just two people sharing space and silence. She felt invisible. She felt like a failure again. Like no matter how much she gave the world, she could not make love work for herself. The woman who helped hundreds of people heal could not fix her own home. She did not want another divorce, so she did what millions of hurting people do. She turned to her church. Latoshia was attending St. Mark's Baptist Church in Little Rock when she connected with Pastor Brody's Perry. He was the executive pastor there, a respected man of God who ran life groups and offered private counseling to congregation members. People trusted him. He had that kind of steady, authoritative presence that made you feel like everything was going to be okay when you walked into his office. Latoshia signed up for private marriage counseling. The first session went exactly how you would hope. Perry listened carefully. He prayed with her. He offered perspective and compassion. She walked out feeling lighter than she had in months. This was exactly what she needed. 2 weeks later, she went back for her second session. That was when everything changed. I want you to sit with this for a moment, because what happened next is not just shocking. It is a fundamental betrayal of every trust a counselor is supposed to carry. They were sitting close in that quiet room. Latoshia was pouring out her heart, talking about feeling unseen and unloved in her marriage, and Perry pulled his chair right next to hers and kissed her. Just like that. The line between pastor and predator blurred in a single moment. He slept with her right there, during what was supposed to be a session of spiritual guidance and healing. I cannot imagine the confusion she felt. She had walked in broken and looking for direction. She walked out with something she had not asked for and would not be able to undo.
And then after that, we had sex, and it was just rough, and it was hard, and it was just not what I was used to. And then once we finished, something he never ever does was he rolled over and just gave me the cold shoulder, and I was like, "You're not gonna hold me?" And he was like, "No," and just went to sleep. I felt so used. I was just like, what has always happened to me?
The affair began in early 2017, which later lasted for the next 2 years. Now, here is where the story gets even more tangled. Perry was married. His wife's name is Tabitha. And from the very beginning, Perry told Latoshia that Tabitha knew about everything and was okay with it. He described it as an open arrangement, even using the phrase ethical non-monogamy to make it sound reasonable and thought out. He even talked about a future where Latoshia could be a kind of sister wife, part of an agreed arrangement. At the time, Latoshia wanted to believe him. She was vulnerable, lonely, and finally feeling something that felt like attention and love after years of emotional neglect at home. Over the months that followed, they developed a real routine. They took trips together, often using church group travel as cover so no one would ask questions. Latoshia would pay for her own flights and gas every single time. Perry would cover the hotel rooms, and once they were alone in those rooms, he had one rule he enforced strictly. She had to be naked the entire time they were there together, or he would grow cold and distant. That detail alone tells you so much about the power dynamic in that relationship. Here is the worst part. As time went on, Perry started pushing the boundaries further. He began bringing up ethical non-monogamy, not just in the context of Tabitha, but with other women entirely. He wanted Latoshia to help him expand this secret circle. He showed her videos and talked about open relationship ideas like it was all perfectly normal. Latoshia shut it down. She told him she was only willing to accept the arrangement with his wife, no other women. She was not interested and made that absolutely clear, but he kept bringing it up anyway. And every single Sunday, he stood in that pulpit preaching about faithfulness, commitment, and the sanctity of marriage. Let me ask you something. How do you stand in front of hundreds of people and talk about the kind of man God wants you to be, while secretly manipulating a grieving woman and breaking every promise you made to your own wife? How do you live with that kind of split? I am not here to put all the blame on one person, but I need you to understand the environment Latoshia was operating in, because none of what came next happens without what he built. In early 2019, Perry got a major career boost. He was offered a position as executive pastor at Mississippi Boulevard Christian Church in Collierville, Tennessee, a quiet suburb just outside Memphis. This was not a small deal. Mississippi Boulevard is one of the oldest and most historically significant black churches in the region, founded back in 1921. Taking this position meant more visibility, more responsibility, and a much bigger stage. He and Tabitha packed up and moved to Tennessee, and the affair with Latoshia started cooling off almost immediately. By April of 2019, Perry ended things with Latoshia. He told her it was over. No explanation, no plan, no acknowledgement of the 2 years she had given him, no recognition of the trips she had funded, or the emotional investment she had made, just the door closing. I think about what that moment must have felt like for her. 2 years of believing the promises. 2 years of flying and driving to meet a man who told her she was special. 2 years of holding on to the idea that what they had was real, and then nothing. She was shattered.
Yes. As far as it came to trips that he wanted me to go on with him, I was the one who had to pay my way as far as airfare or travel. And then he would, his words would, he would then take care of the rest, meaning that I would have somewhere to stay. When I was in the hotel rooms, I was to stay naked. I couldn't have on any clothes. I had to, and the only way I would have clothes on is if, we were getting ready to go out. But other than that, when in the hotel room, I had to be naked.
That same month, she bought a gun in Sherwood, Arkansas. She said later it was for protection, prosecutors would see it very differently. On April 4th, 2019, Latoshia got in her car and drove from Little Rock to Collierville, over 2 hours on the highway with a gun in the vehicle and a heart that had been torn apart. She pulled up to the Meridian Place apartments where Perry and Tabitha now lived. She knocked on the door. Tabitha opened it. Latoshia told her she was in town for a conference and just wanted to say hello, like old church friends catching up. Tabitha smiled and let her in. Why would she not? As far as she knew, this was just a familiar face from back home, a fellow church member passing through. She had absolutely no idea. Because here is what Tabitha did not know. She did not know that this woman standing in her living room had been sleeping with her husband for nearly 2 full years. She did not know about the hotel rooms her husband had been paying for. She did not know about the trips disguised as church travel, the late-night phone calls, or the promises Perry had made about their future together. She did not know that her husband had been telling this woman that their marriage was open, that she was okay with everything, that this arrangement had her blessing. Perry had never told her any of it. So while Latoshia sat in that apartment looking at the wife she had been told was a willing participant in everything, Tabitha was just being a good host, offering conversation, acting normal, completely unaware that the life she thought she had was not the life her husband had actually been living. Then Perry came home, and the moment he walked through that door and saw Latoshia sitting in his living room, you can only imagine what went through him. This was the woman he had ended things with just weeks earlier, the woman he had cut off without a real explanation. And now, she was sitting across from his wife, in his home, in the city he had moved to, specifically to start fresh. What followed was a tense and awkward conversation between all three of them, but at some point, the truth started coming out, whether Latoshia said it directly or whether it unraveled through the tension in the room. Tabitha began to realize that something was very wrong, that this woman was not just a church acquaintance, that whatever connection existed between her husband and this woman was far deeper than she had ever been told. Think about what that moment felt like for Tabitha, standing in her own home, looking at her husband, looking at this woman, and slowly the pieces clicking together in real time. The trips he had taken, the times he had been unreachable, all the small things she may have pushed aside, or explained away over the years suddenly making a terrible kind of sense. Perry, facing the walls closing in, did not step up. He did not take responsibility. He did not comfort his wife or try to explain himself to Latoshia. Instead, he told Tabitha to walk Latoshia out. He handed the mess he had created to the woman he had deceived the most, and he stepped back. The two women walked out to the parking lot together. One of them had just had her world flipped upside down inside that apartment. The other had been carrying 2 years of pain and rejection and had driven hours to find some kind of answer. And in that parking lot, something inside Latoshia broke completely. She pulled the gun and fired multiple shots into Brody's Perry while screaming that he had broken her heart. He collapsed in that parking lot at 36 years old. Tabitha, the woman who had just learned in the most devastating way possible that her marriage was a lie, ran toward the building screaming for help. Latoshia shot her in the shoulder. However, Tabitha survived that shot, but Perry did not. Neighbors called 911. Police arrived. Latoshia was arrested on the spot. The man who had preached from that pulpit every Sunday, the man who had built an entire reputation on faith and integrity and guiding broken people toward healing, was gone. And the wife he had lied to for 2 years was left standing there, wounded, grieving, and processing a betrayal she never even knew was happening until the very last moment. Latoshia was taken into custody that same day. In July of 2019, a Shelby County grand jury indicted her on first-degree murder, attempted first-degree murder for shooting Tabitha, assault, and using a firearm during a felony. She sat in jail for over 6 years before the trial. Court backlogs, the pandemic, scheduling delays. More than 2,000 days locked up before a single jury heard her story. During that time, she wrote books. She tried to process the pain and hold herself together. She was 46 years old when the trial finally started in early November 2025 in Shelby County, Tennessee. She took the stand herself. She talked about her mental health history, She described the depression that had followed her since her teenage years. She explained how the affair started in that counseling room and how much control Perry had held over her. She wept. Prosecutors called it premeditation. She bought the gun. She drove across state lines. She waited at his door. In their telling, she was a woman who could not accept being rejected. The jury deliberated for only a couple of hours. They found her guilty of second-degree murder.
New information tonight at 5. The Arkansas woman accused of shooting a Memphis pastor to death was back in court this morning. Latoshia Daniels is charged with shooting and killing Brodus Perry, the executive pastor at Mississippi Boulevard Christian Church, and injuring his wife in their Collierville apartment last April. Daniels pleaded not guilty and will remain in jail until her next court appearance in mid-November.
They also convicted her of criminal attempt to commit reckless endangerment for the shot that hit Tabitha. They found her not guilty on the firearm charge. Sentencing was postponed several times. Finally, on February 24, 2026, Latoshia stood before the judge. She cried the entire time. She apologized to the Perry family. She apologized to Tabitha. She spoke about godly sorrow and how fragile she had been. She asked for mercy.
To the Perry family, no words can express the pain that I feel, nor will it ever take away the pain that you feel. But I want to say to you that I'm godly sorrowful. But please know, I never meant for any of this to happen. To my family, I'm so sorry that I've taken you guys through this. Never meant to hurt or harm anyone. And I'm so godly sorrowful.
The judge did not see it that way. He called the shooting deliberate and senseless. He said heartbreak, no matter how deep, does not give anyone the right to take a life. He pointed to the gun purchase, the drive, and the moment she pulled the trigger as evidence of clear intent. He sentenced her to 20 years for second-degree murder, plus 11 months and 29 days for the reckless endangerment charge, running at the same time. Effectively 20 years in a Tennessee prison. With good behavior, she could be released after serving a portion of that time, but she will be in her 60s when she walks free. Her defense team announced immediately that they will file a motion for a new trial and appeal the conviction and sentence.
So I want to quickly turn our attention to Tennessee, where just moments ago, defendant Latoshia Daniels was sentenced to 20 years behind bars. Now, Daniels was convicted last year of fatally shooting her married pastor boyfriend, Brodus Perry, and injuring his wife, Tabitha.
State of Tennessee versus Latoshia Daniels, indictment number 25-01253. Verdict form count 1. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of second-degree murder as included in count 1 of indictment number 25-01253. State of Tennessee versus Latoshia Daniels, indictment number 25-01253. Verdict form count 2. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of reckless endangerment as included in count 2 of indictment number 25-01253. State of Tennessee versus Latoshia Daniels, indictment number 25-01253. Verdict form count 3. We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty in count 3 of indictment number 25-01253.
I have been sitting with this case for a long time, and I keep coming back to the same question. How do two people, a woman who dedicated her life to helping others heal, and a man who dedicated his life to spiritual leadership, end up in a parking lot like this? The answer is layers. It is unresolved pain. It is a pastor who used the most sacred kind of trust to get what he wanted. It is a woman who had been carrying so much for so long that when she finally felt seen, even by the wrong person, she could not let go. It is what happens when real mental health struggles go unaddressed and heartbreak is left to fester with no outlet. Latoshia Daniels will spend the next 2 decades in prison. The Perry family will never have Brody's back. Tabitha carries that scar and that memory every single day. There are no winners in this story, just wreckage. If you are carrying pain right now, if something in this story touched something in you, please reach out to someone real. A counselor, a trusted friend, a crisis line. Help is out there, and it does not have to end like this. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Was the sentence fair? Could better mental health support have changed the outcome? Hit that like button if this story moved you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe so you never miss a story like this one. Take care of your heart, because sometimes the most dangerous wounds are the ones nobody else can see.